Oh,
Everybody has to behave. No. Don't put me on yet. Let's
No, not yet.
let's let a little more gathering energy.
Okay.
I think it's All Hallows Eve.
Cheers.
People are coming in from eating candy on the street.
I haven't put up off the street because that would be.
candy?
Candy,
Is it candy?
candy. So we just need a few more minutes. Nothing spooky really happens on time.
Never happens predictably.
We just gave out 143 pounds
There you are. Hi,
of
Alton.
goldfish.
Awesome.
Robert is in. You can see Robert is appearing at the Vibe head from time to time.
No, your shoulders showed.
I know. That's okay.
So I would like to draw attention to
Want you to do
the chat.
it.
Dan Ujansky is working as a story scout for an NPR broadcast called Spooked, and it features true stories of the supernatural. And I believe his email is on that. Yes, it is. If you have a true story to share, a supernatural, ghosty type of story, then send Dan_Ushinsky at hotmail.com an email with your tale. Maybe you'll be on this NPR show. Ooh.
Ah, that's Sarah Burnett here. That's lovely.
Maybe Carol Burnett would show up today.
Huh? Carol Burnett?
Yeah. That would
She's still alive.
I know, but wouldn't it be awesome if she showed up?
Yeah. Oh my, yeah.
That would bring some kudos to us.
Well, let's wait another 2 minutes and then we'll begin, if that's okay with everybody.
Mhm.
There is this kind of chatting, which is really nice to start. Now everybody's quiet.
Now everybody shut up when you said that.
Okay, there's
Are
Joe.
you talking about Dan's?
Philomena Jordan is here.
So what happened to the drumming?
Oh,
Remember, one for a tea break.
yeah. I mean, it's disruptive.
There's Donna. We can see her now. Excellent.
I had this funny thought when I was walking on the street today. I was thinking, looking at New Yorkers on Broadway, whether really we are ghosts, but we are convinced that we're living. And because you never could tell, we believe so many things. Anyway,
We could all be someone's dream. We're not real.
Yes. Don't we all? My son went through a period of thinking that everyone's robots and aliens, and he's part of this. I used to think that as well at some point.
Sarah Armstrong, Dana Sher, I've seen you in so long.
I know Joel's here, which is awesome.
Dana, Sherry, yay.
And Sarah Armstrong, she's here. But all these wonderful people.
And Lori's here.
Lori is here.
I thought I saw Ruth Niven, but now
Sarah Armstrong, yay.
it's here. How's she doing?
You know, Laura, my daughter and grandson are on Broadway right now. They went to go see Lion King.
Oh,
Cool.
well, wonderful. It's still great.
I know. He's only not even 3 yet, so we'll see.
Well, I think that we should start. And so we're going to have a little intro, a little drum roll to bring us in,
Okay.
wake up what spirits are lurking, and also to keep away those spirits we don't want.
Begin.
Welcome. I'm so delighted that we're here together in this particular evening where it's said in many places in the world that the doors to the other world that usually are closed or that we don't pay attention to spring open, that the veil between the visible and invisible world is very thin, maybe even disappeared for the night. So one has to be careful. There's the possibility of ghosts that we don't want coming in. And there's the possibility tonight of great blessings and joy and wishes to be fulfilled. So anytime you want to share your wishes for yourself and for our world in the chat, please go ahead. And the image I have for tonight, we're 6 storytellers and 1 disembodied head. And the idea is to really share informally, yearly, actual encounters, whether they were momentary or sort of strange coincidences or just very blatant encounters with ghosts, spirits, invisibles. Those things that are unforgettable. And for all of us storytellers, obviously, in our lives, I think we have had those encounters, sometimes during the storytelling itself. So the image I have for this evening is all of us seated on a gigantic dinner table in a remote cemetery. And we're feasting on memories. And from time to time, throwing salt over our shoulders to keep away the evil eye. And sometimes just offering food to those who have been departed. So I'll tell you who the storytellers are. And we're just going to see how this unfolds. And then afterwards, it's an open menu. So anyone who has a sort of irresistible, arising story of an encounter, even just a fragment or an image, I hope that we'll have enough time for you to share that with us. I thought I would set the ground for our evening by telling you my very first encounter with a ghost. I was 5 or 6 years old, and my family lived in Brooklyn in a large old house that had once been a farmhouse in the
What
18th.
happened, Robert? I can't hear.
I don't know.
And my bedroom on the 2nd floor was under the largest room in our attic. And there was a night where I woke up from a dream where I heard the most beautiful and very sad violin music. And when I opened my eyes, I could still hear that sound. But I was a little girl, I didn't make much of it, and I fell back to sleep. But for 4 continuous nights, I woke up in the middle of the night hearing this uncanny violin music. And I understood at some time that it was coming from the attic. And so I thought, well, maybe my parents had a guest in the attic. And one morning, I went downstairs for breakfast and I asked if there was someone sleeping in our attic. And everyone seemed very surprised. And then I asked if anyone had heard the violin music. Now, my brother, whose one of his main missions in life was to terrify me. He was 7 years older than me, and I had rudely come into the family just when my father returned from the war. My brother had been alone with his grandparents and my mother, and there he was with my father for months. He was the prince, and then I arrived, needing attention, crying, needing to eat. My brother said, "Oh, that's the violinist who hung himself in our attic." My father instantly went behind the newspaper.
That might have been.
My
Can
mother,
the host mute Charles?
maybe if someone is unmuted or if there is someone unexpected, could you please mute? And if you're not real, if you could be quiet during the story. Sort of eerie. My mother said, "Oh, he was a great violinist. He was born in Hungary. He came to live with us after the war." My brother, delighted, said, "Yes, and he hung himself right over your bedroom." My mother told me the story of the Hungarian violinist. There was no room for him at a neighbor's house, and so he came and moved into our attic. He must have been very unhappy, said my mother, to explain the suicide. And then she said, if he plays music again, call out to him and tell him how beautiful the sound of the violin is, and that you wish his spirit would rest. So there was another night where I heard the sound. And even though I was a little girl, I called out and said, "That music is so beautiful. May you rest in peace." And then I heard footsteps running. I got up out of bed. I went to the door where the attic was. I opened it, and for an instant, I saw a man. And then it was gone. Truly, I never went into the attic at night. I dreamed over and over again that enormous spiders lived on the stairwell. And then once, years later, visiting our neighbor with my mother, I happened to pass by a photograph of her family, the only thing she had left after the Holocaust. And seated among generations was a young man holding a violin. And I recognized the face of the young man that I had seen on the steps. I'm going to turn it over to Dan Yashinsky, who, when he heard this story a few weeks ago, we were talking on the phone, told me a story about his grandfather.
Thank you, Laura, and welcome everybody. These Zoom storytelling things are like those secret poker games where there's no street address, but you need a password to get in. So here we are in Zoom land. I'm really hoping to stay for the whole evening, but our daughter is just back from an operation and needs quite a bit of support. So I'm really hoping I can be here. Her mom's downstairs with her now. And it's nice to see a lot of Canadians on the call. Yay. And if any of our American friends want to come up to the land of universal health care, there's extra bedrooms in my place. And on behalf of all the Canadians here, I can just say one thing, and that is, oi. So, but I'm an optimist, so go, Kamala. So about my grandfather, I myself have not had a direct experience of this other world, the mysterious realm, but I grew up hearing a lot of stories from my grandfather, and one in particular, I'll tell you tonight. My family has two ghost stories, and this is one of them. If there's time later and I'm still around, I'll tell you the other one. It's a good one too. But I should tell you, my grandfather was an engineer, born and raised in Romania, which is one reason Laura and I are brother and sister, because we come from similar backgrounds. And my grandfather left Romania to go to Paris to study engineering. And among other things, he used to tell me stories of that experience when he was a young student. He belonged to the Society for the Prevention of Seasickness. Pretty exciting social club back in those days, I guess. And he still had the barbells to show me what he used to do so you wouldn't get seasick. Apparently they helped. Then he moved to Japan and he helped build skyscrapers. And he used to tell me stories about Japan, and he loved Japan very much. So here's a man who spoke Romanian, French, Yiddish, and Japanese, and then English, and probably Latin and Greek too. One thing he told me about Japan was he loved the fact that men and women went to the bathhouse together. So he told me he took a lot of baths when he lived in Japan. And then he moved to San Francisco. So this is at the very beginning of the last century. And he was in San Francisco working as a young engineer on the power lines that went from the High Sierras into San Francisco. And he told me stories about for example, one time he noticed that when the men lined up for food in the mess hall or the big tent up in the mountains, all the crew, there would be 12 guys and then a big space, and then the line would continue. And he asked somebody, why is there a gap in the line at 13? And they said, well, you can't, that's an unlucky number. You can't just stand in the 13th place in line. That's bad luck. So my grandfather went straight to the gap instead of waiting for 100 other guys. He went straight to the line and he called out to the whole line of workers, I'm Jewish, 13 is a lucky number. So then one night he's feeling homesick. He's in San Francisco and he missed his family. He was a young guy, far from home, no easy way to communicate with anybody in those days, just letters, really. And they would have to go by boat. And he knew that his grandfather had also emigrated to St. Louis, Missouri. But he didn't have his address and he wasn't in touch with him. But he knew that he was also in the States somewhere. So one night, my grandfather had a dream. And in the dream, his grandfather came walking towards him. And his grandfather was filled with golden light. And he walked over to my grandpa and he said to him, "Nicky, I've come to say goodbye. I want to tell you I love you very much. You'll have a good life. You will be happy. But I will never see you again." And this golden grandfather of his disappeared. So in the morning, he woke up and he was very full of the dream and he wrote it down. And he sent a letter to Romania and it said, "Dear family, I'm doing well. I have a job. I'm in San Francisco." Tell him the whole story. And he said, "And I was just wondering, how is grandfather?" Now, the letter took a long time to get home and it took a long time to get back again, the response. And when he opened the letter, he saw that his parents had written to say, "We're sorry to tell you the news, but your grandfather died." And he had written the dream down in his journal, which I still have in my library right behind me. And he checked the date and it was the same night that he had had the dream. Now, my grandfather told me this story quite a bit when I was a kid, and he used to say, even though he was an engineer and a mathematician, he said, "The world is filled with mysteries." And then he would draw the sign of infinity on my pillow or wherever we were, and he'd say, "You should always remember that all of us have the sign of infinity written in our heart, and that's the part of us that never dies." And just a little bit of a coda to that story. So I guess I did have something strange happen in my life, because one year my wife was pregnant with our firstborn to be, first almost born, and I was teaching at a university about an hour out of town, and so I had a pager. Okay, no cell phones in those days. I had a pager, and even if I went swimming, I'd give it to the lifeguard, say, "If this goes off, get me out of the pool." So I was teaching a course on storytelling, and we went around the circle. On this particular day, the topic was ghost stories, because they're a big part of folklore and a big part of personal experience, as we know. And it got to my turn as the teacher in the circle, and I got so far as to say, "Speaking of ghost stories, my grandfather," and I was just about to tell the story I've just told you, when the pager went off and our son was born the next day, and we'd always known that if it was a boy, he'd be named after this grandfather. Now, I would like to invite Lynn Ford to tell the next story.
Oh, thank you, Dan. That was beautiful, absolutely beautiful. And it reminds me of times with my family. And Laura spoke of when she was a little girl. And all of that fits into something that I'm going to share that I rarely share, because people might think I'm strange. But at this point in my life, people know I'm strange and I don't care anymore. So I was about 7, and we were visiting in East Liverpool, Ohio. We were going to stay at my Uncle Kedrick's home, which was the family cabin. It had been built by my pops and my great-grandfather, my great-pops, and some of the older men in the family. And whoever needed a place to stay, they could move into that cabin. Well, I guess it was Uncle Kedrick's turn, and he and Aunt Dessa and their girls were staying there. And I didn't like being there for one very specific reason. They did not have indoor plumbing. And I did not like the idea of going to the outhouse. And I was very angry and upset about that. And I would hold things for as long as I possibly could until I could convince folks that I needed to stay with my great grandparents, who had a nice Victorian gingerbread type of house with indoor plumbing. So nobody was convinced, and I was frustrated, and there was too much noise in that cabin. And I decided I was going to go for a walk. Now, this was winter, and I had never been at that cabin in the winter time, but I figured I knew where I was going because I'd been there in the summers. And so I walked away, and I started to walk up a little incline. It wasn't enough to be a hill. And I kept on walking and listening to the crunching of the snow underneath my boots. And then I realized I wasn't sure where I was, but I figured I knew how to get back. And I was wrong, because I ended up someplace else that I didn't know. And I started to get very nervous, and I started to really feel the cold. And I kept on walking, but much slower than I had before. And I could feel myself starting to get that goosebumpy feeling, the lump in your throat. You know you're going to cry. And before the first tear fell, I noticed a little cabin sitting off the side of the path. And there was a boy standing on this little porch. And the cabin looked really old, and it wasn't in good shape, but he was standing there, and he had his arms folded over his chest, and it looked like he had his pajamas on. And he had a haircut that reminded me of Moe in the Three Stooges. And I just looked at him, and he looked at me a little bit, and he said, "You're going the wrong way. Go back. Go straight." And now he didn't seem much bigger or older than I was, but there was some force to his voice. And so I think I said, "Thank you." I'm not sure, but I turned around and I started to walk, and I looked back, and he was pointing. So I kept on walking, and I realized that I really had gone too far. I'd missed the little trail that I had used to get into the woods. And there it was. I could see my footsteps. And when I went a little bit farther, I could see the roof of the cabin. And a little bit farther, and I could see my father. And I could tell he was probably looking for me, and so was Uncle Kedrick, and I was probably in trouble. And I figured that was the time to cry, because if I was pitiful enough, maybe I wouldn't be in too much trouble. So I wrenched my face all up and sniffled, and I can't remember everything I said, but I do remember saying I was lost. And they started fussing at me, and Uncle Kedrick asked how I'd found my way back. And I told him about the little boy on the porch of that old cabin, and how he told me I'd gone too far and to go straight. And Uncle Kedrick just kind of looked at me, and he said, "What'd that boy look like?" So I told him about the pajamas, and I told him about the bowl haircut, and he didn't say anything. He sent me in the house, and I didn't seem to be in trouble. So I didn't tell my mother. If they weren't going to tell her, I knew I wasn't going to tell my mother. And time passed, and that was the end of it. Or so I thought. When I was 16 years old, Uncle Kedrick and Aunt Dessa were separating. And he was going to stay in the cabin, but Aunt Dessa and the girls were going to move further into town. And so some of us were there to help with the move. And even though it was a sad kind of occasion, it wasn't terrible. Everybody was getting along just fine. And my father said to me, "I waited a while to tell you because I didn't want you to be scared." And I thought, scared of what? He said, "Do you remember that time you got lost in the woods when you were a little girl, in the wintertime, in the snow? And you said that there was a little boy at a cabin who pointed to where you should go." And I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Well, I was talking to your uncle after you went in the house. And he said there wasn't any little cabin up that hill and in the woods. That there had been one when he was a boy, but in a terrible winter's cold, when the fire was built too high, too much in the fireplace, that house burnt down. And the old woman who lived there, she died, sleep in her bed. She didn't wake up. Now understand, I'm paraphrasing, because I can't tell you word for word what my daddy said. But I felt terrible. An old woman had died. And then I asked about a little boy. Was there a little boy? And my daddy said that her grandson had been living with her. And whether he ran out of fear or whether he ran to try to get help, he ran out of that house. And in that cold, cold weather, they found his body in the snow. And I thought, oh, that's so sad. That's so sad. Wait a minute. There's no house. And a little boy died. And I thought of the little boy in the pajamas with a haircut like Mo from the Three Stooges. And so when I had a chance, I walked away from that cabin that was the family cabin, and I walked up that incline that wasn't quite a hill. And even though it was a different season, I kind of knew where I was going. And there was no house. The only thing there was a foundation and what looked like the brick of a fireplace. The chimney dropped back into the woods. Now, I'm not trying to tell you that I remember everything, but I do remember that. And there was something about the way my daddy told me about the little boy that kept me from ever going into those woods again. He'd helped me once, but I wasn't sure if he'd be happy that I was still alive, and he wasn't. And that's a story from my childhood. Take it as you will. Now, I'm not sure who's supposed to go next, but my time is up. Is it Nancy?
If she wants to unmute herself, yeah.
All right. Wow, Lynn, I love that, because there are, they walk around us. They really do. So just be on the watch at all times. So I have two experiences that I want to tell you about, and they are connected, though they're very separate. But first I have to tell you that I am a channeler. I channel. And Robert is my scribe, and we have about 3 volumes of all the notes from many, many, many decades now. And one time, well, first of all, let me tell you how we do it. So I check in, and we have a guardian. And it's usually the same person each time, but sometimes that person gets reassigned. So then we get someone else. And that person sometimes gets reassigned, but at any rate, they all seem to be women. So our guides are women. And we'll do things like, well, how are we doing? I check in, I ask, what do you think? How are we doing? And they, the person will tell us, that guardian will tell us. And then we ask about maybe, for example, Robert's father is an atheist and my mom was an atheist, and they thought this was it. This plane of life is it. There's nothing that follows after, there was nothing before. So we'd like to say, can we talk to them to see how, up there where we think they are, to see what they think now that they find out that there is an afterlife and they're up there doing their thing. Or we'll talk about what we need to do next. Sometimes we just say, is there something that you would like us to know? And one time our guardian said, whoops.
Call from the other world.
Thanks, Dad, Mom. Okay. Sometimes, so one time this guardian of ours said, there's only one difference between dolphins and humans. Dolphins remember that they come from love, and humans have forgotten that. So I've always remembered that. So let me tell you about one situation. Robert and I went to Hawaii for the first time together. And so we played the tourist. And so one of the things we decided to go visit was a heiau. Now, heiaus are ancient Hawaiian temples. So I'm going to show you, they look very simple. Here's one. It's simply a long rectangular space that's built with walls of rocks around them. And if you see, sometimes there's an altar. Sometimes they're in a field, but sometimes they're by the ocean. The one we went to was closer to the ocean. So there we have it. That's really what a heiau looks like. It looks very benign. But we walked into a heiau, and there were other people, about 12 or 15 other people walking around the perimeter on the grounds and looking around. But when I and Robert got in about 10 feet into the heiau, I felt this huge, heavy presence pressuring on my chest, and my breath got shorter and shorter. And I thought, this is weird, it'll pass. We kept walking, and it just kept getting stronger. So I said to Robert, I have to stop. And I told him what happened. So we went back to the car. We didn't drive away. No, I decided I needed to channel to see what was this all about. So I tried contacting our guardian, when instead all these voices came at me instead. And the voices were saying that they were sad, they were desperate, they were angry, they were sad, they were mourning, they were just, it was horrible. And so I asked what was going on. Why are you here? Why are you telling me this? And they said they had all been sacrificed, human sacrifices, to the god of shark, the god of sharks. And they said his name was Ali'i. Aloha? Okay, aloha. Close enough. So I said, and I had not known that the heiaus had sacrifices until that time, and that the altars were not for just, building fires and incense and stuff like that, but they were actually, the sacrifices were laid out on those. And for the god of sharks, they were then given to the sharks to feast on. So I asked if they wanted to move on, and if they wanted to move on, how could I help them? And they wanted to move on. Most of them said, yes, please, please, we don't want to stay here. And so I talked to them about forgiveness, about what our guardian had once said, humans don't remember that we always come from love. So I talked about forgiveness and about love, and having to love particularly themselves so that they could move on. And suddenly they disappeared. So Robert and I went back into the heiau, 10 feet, 12 feet, and it was fine. I didn't have that pressure anymore. I went over to the altar, and I did another hands laying on that altar, releasing anything that was left over. And after we left the heiau, we went over to a museum. And in the museum, we were reading about heiaus. And there was the one that was sacrifices were given to the god of sharks, and his name was not Aloha, but Ali'i. And I thought, well, that's close enough for me. And so I felt, whew, that was really real. Because sometimes you can doubt yourself about all these things that are happening. So another time, and this is how it's connected, another time I was channeling, Robert scribing, and suddenly this entity burst in, and the entity said very clearly, "I'm going to kill you." Robert and I looked at each other, eyes wide. Oh my God, what do we do now? And so once again, I asked, why? Why do you want to kill me? And this entity was male. And this little angry voice said to me, "You aborted me. I have been aborted over 100 times and I don't like it." So I apologized. And I said, I regretted it. It was a horrible experience for me too. And many would-be mothers regret it and still suffer sometimes from that. So how can we deal with this? How can I help you? Please don't kill me. I want to help you. Do you want to stop being aborted, right? You want to stop, and so tell me, what do you need? And the entity didn't know. She's just still angry. So again, like the difference between dolphins and humans, I talked to him about love and forgiveness. And after a long conversation, he was fine. And I said, "So now that you're fine and you're going to move on, you're not going to kill me, right?" And he said, no, but I'd like to give you a hug. And I said, no, please don't give me a hug. It's okay. You can move on. And off he went. And that's are the two stories I have for you today. Let's remember, we are all from love. So, I don't know who's next. Is it Simon?
Yeah.
Hey, Simon.
Simon, do you think your story is the one? Oh, here's Robin. Maybe Robin's story is.
Oh, Robin might be ready.
I'm always ready with a ghost story. I love true ghost stories, and I've had enough experiences with them to know that when I first talk about them, I sound weird. And my doctor suggested I go to a neurologist once when I tried to tell her the stories, but we didn't go. We sat through it, and I'm going to tell you the story. Now, I never looked for ghosts. They kind of came tapping my shoulder. The first ghost story takes place in Paris. I was about 28, and I was standing there at the gates of Père Lachaise, which you all may or may not know is a fabulous cemetery where I had to write down all the names because there are so many people. Let's see. Oscar Wilde, Molière, Abelard, Proust, Alice B. Toklas, and Gertrude Stein, Balzac, and of course the most popular grave of all is Jim Morrison. It's like amazing. But that's not why I was there. I was there because I had a problem. Well, I thought I had a problem. I was confused. And I thought that if I went to the grave of the greatest actress that had ever been, Sarah Bernhardt, I'd find an answer. So this was a long time ago, and I got a map that was mimeographed. Y'all remember Mimeo, right? Well, it started to drizzle, so you know what happened to that mimeograph. Besides, it was written in French, and all the abbreviations were French. I spoke a little Spanish. I didn't speak any French, and I had learned at this point in my time in Paris, you did not ask for help from people who spoke French if you didn't speak French because they didn't like you. So I didn't know what I was going to do. So I just walked through and I said hello to Moliere and I said hello to Abelard and I waved over at Gertrude and her lover, and it didn't really matter. It had started to rain a little bit harder. I was leaving Paris to meet up with my brother in Germany, so I knew I had to find this grave, or that would be that. This was my last chance. Now, why did I need to find the grave of Sarah Bernhardt? Well, 2 years ago, I had achieved my dream of going to a fine acting school in New York. I was so excited when I got in, and I loved it at first. And then it was just so different from anything I had ever experienced. I had come from theater companies that worked as a group, that we supported each other. I was really uncomfortable with the amount of friction and competitiveness, and we were just students, for God's sake. Be that as it may, I had achieved my dream. So why was I so unhappy? And I couldn't figure it out. I just couldn't figure out what is wrong with me. And my brother had sent me some money to travel in Europe before I came to see him in Berlin, where he lived. And what is wrong with me? Why am I unhappy doing the thing that I've always wanted to do my whole life? And for some reason, I thought, if I found the grave, I would get an answer. But I was not doing very well. And it was like 2 hours. It was getting dark. The wind was whipping. All I had was this light dress on and my little sandals. And I didn't even have a jacket. Definitely didn't have an umbrella. My map was a mess. So I turn around and I'm going to leave, even though I wasn't quite sure where the exit was. And all of a sudden, I've always tried to figure out how far it was exactly, a ways away, I saw this woman just standing there. She had a little babushka on, she had curly brown hair, she had bright blue eyes, she had a long dress on. I mean, like an old-fashioned dress, and she had a bib apron, that came up, was white and it tied in the back, and she had a basket of tools. And I'm thinking, what is with these French people? I was pretty intolerant at that point. Why do they dress their gardeners up in costumes? So I'm about to just turn away from her and just walk and see where I go. And I look back at her and she's doing this. I'm thinking, if I go to her, is she going to talk to me in French? Am I going to feel like a fool again? But I went. I felt pulled. And the closer I get, I could see she had this beautiful smile and these bright blue eyes. And they were kind. And when I got very close, and she's a beautiful woman, she had rosy skin and she looked very kind. And right then I needed kindness. And she pointed over my shoulder back to where I'd come from, and then a little more. And I, not as inelegantly as that, but, and I went. And I walked to where I'd been. I walked a little further. And now I knew I had looked in that area before. I had been in that area before. But I hadn't seen what was right in front of me, which was the beautiful marble, white marble gravesite of Sarah Bernhardt. It was raised and it had like an umbrella over it made of white marble. And I was so grateful. I just sat down right there and I put my hands on the marble and I just said, thank you. Then I looked and that woman that I had seen, she was waving to me and smiling. And then little by little, she was disappearing. First her dress, then her body. All that was left was the smile. I put my focus on the grave site and I pressed my hands into that white marble and I felt warmth coming up. And the warmth was going through my body, my arms, my shoulders, my head started to feel untroubled, and my heart and I knew the answer of what I was looking for. Just keep on doing, keep on going, because you are not alone. That was my first ghost. Thank you. And I believe that it is the fabulous Simon Brooks who comes next.
I can get myself on there. But Robin, before you go, I got a question for you. So do you know who that person was that was waving? Do you think that was Sarah, or do you think that was just somebody else there that was, wow?
I'm not sure. I like to think it was Sarah.
Okay.
It could have been a guardian angel, which I do believe in.
Yeah, no, I believe in those things too. That's what an experience to have in France and all that kind of stuff. That's awesome. I mean, I guess it could happen anywhere, but that's that. You didn't really care. They were the French. Thanks, Robin. I'll remove you now. Whoop, there we go. All right, so my story is kind of different. I got two stories. One of them is really short, and this wasn't the first time that I experienced ghosts, but it's a good way to like lean into this. When I was little, I used to, we used to go on hikes and walks and everything, and we usually ended up in a little village. And in England, there's like a lot of the old churches are absolutely incredible. We would often go and visit them. And I had this really rather bad habit of finding grave sites that were the right size for me. And I'd lay down and say, hey, Mom, this one fits, which would freak her out. And she'd be like, get off that. But when I was in my 20s, I was dating this girl whose parents lived in London, in Waltham. And this girl was living in Worcester, where I was living at the time. And we were a couple, a pair. And her name was Samantha, and she had gone up to visit her parents, and I was following up. And they lived in a small council flat, which I think they'd actually bought at this particular point. And so the door was downstairs, but then you go up this flight of stairs and their apartment was upstairs. And so I get there and I knock on the door and ring the bell, and Peg, Samantha's mom, comes downstairs. And she's like, hey, come on in, and all the rest of it. And she like leads me up the stairs, and I close the door behind me, and I'm like coming up the stairs after her. And all of a sudden she stopped and she put her arm over my chest and pushed me against the wall of the stairs. And I felt this cold draft go past me. And I kind of got an idea that something weird had just happened. And then she just let go and walked up the stairs as if nothing had happened. And then later that evening, I went up to Samantha and I was like, what the heck was that? And apparently Samantha's grandmother, Peg's mom, she would sometimes go in and out of the house. And if people were walking up and down the stairs and Peg was with them, she'll push them against the wall to give her mother more room. And there's lots of other stories that Sam would tell me about her mother and ghostly experiences, but those aren't mine to tell. My ghostly experience happened before that. And I've had a couple of other things that happened since, but I'm just going to talk about this one. There was this building that a group of us used to hang out in called the Worcester Arts Workshop. And it was a safe second home for a lot of us who went there. They did all sorts of arts, from pottery to like music, dance. It was like everything, photography. It was like everything was done there. And I kind of grew up there along with a couple of my friends and the rest in this little group, this gang. And at one point I decided, for some strange and bizarre reason, that I was going to raise money for cancer research. And it was just like, I can't remember why, but it was like, I'm going to raise money for cancer research. And so because I was in a band, I said, let's do a 24-hour jam session. We'll just play music nonstop for 24 hours. And so the first thing we had to do was find musicians that would come and join us and like take over from us, so that we weren't just, each of us were playing nonstop for 24 hours. And then we had to find a venue to do this. And the Worcester Arts Workshop said that they would let us use their space, which was awesome. But then they started telling us these ghost stories that happened at the Worcester Arts Workshop, when Jane and Richard, who were the people that were running the place, would experience after hours when it got dark. Richard talked about how go into that room through a door, but found the door shut. The only way to get into that room was to go out of the building, come in through the other door and come up on the other side of it. It was like a passageway room. And when he got into the room, every single chair and table was stacked up on each other, up against that one particular wall. There had been other incidences where furniture had been moved around, artwork that had been put in one room was all of a sudden in another room. And we just thought, the group of us that were going to be doing this, we just thought they were winding us up to get us scared for when we were staying overnight. This was a 3-story building and we were going to be in the top room. And we had a room in the middle on the second floor where it was kind of diagonal to where we were playing music. And we were going to, those of us that wanted to rest or sleep or just like, you know, get some quiet time, as it were, we would, during the night, we would be down here. And on this particular floor, there was also a bathroom, but the bathroom was broken. So we had to go down a spiral staircase into the kitchen and exhibit area, which is where the other bathroom was that was working. And because this was like, I don't know, it's like the 1980s, early, mid 1980s. There was only one key to this old building. And so we were locked in and told where the escape windows were and left to it. And so we were performing and playing and just making songs up, and it was a great time. And there was a number of people who had come to join us, and I was exhausted. It was like 2 o'clock in the morning or something like that. And I went downstairs into this little camping room that we had set aside, and I lay down in there. And I felt, as I was laying there looking at the ceiling, I felt this like swirling, dark energy. And it wasn't a happy energy at all. It was a really, it was a, I don't want to use the word evil, but it was really angry and it was really negative. And it spun around and spun around and spun around. And then it shot off out of the room. And at that point I was like, yeah, I don't know if I want to stay in this room. I think I'll just like stay up for 24 hours and play with the guys upstairs. And as I came out of this room, this guy called Andy, I think his name was Andy, he was about to use the bathroom on that floor. And I said, you can't use that one, you got to use the one downstairs. And he said, well, where is it? And I said, well, I'll go down and I'll show you, you know, because the kitchen's down there. I'm going to get myself a cup of tea. And as we were walking down the spiral staircase, all of that ground floor was pitch black. The lights weren't on down there. And as we were like halfway down the stairs, we heard this terrifying scream. It was, I can't describe what it sounded like. It was just like horrible. And Andy and I, we both looked at each other and I said, "Did you do that?" And then we were like, "No." And we hoofed it back upstairs. And we spent the rest of the evening up in those stairs, and we were using that middle bathroom, even though it was broken. So later, when the sun started to rise, the person that there were two girls that lived next door to my brother and myself. They were also staying, helping us out, cheering us on, and all the rest of it. Well, Belinda went downstairs when dawn was appearing. She said there was this horrible, horrible, horrible smell that she couldn't describe, and that was disgusting, unlike anything she'd ever smelt before. And so we were kind of like wondering if it was the same thing that had made this noise downstairs. And when we were told other people upstairs, you know, "Did anyone make a strange noise?" And nobody's, no, like, what are you guys talking about? And thought that we were winding them up. And the next day, when Jane and Richard come back, we tell them about this, and they say, "Oh, apparently there was this murder or death or something where someone was hung from a beam that used to be there before the building was renovated." And I've since said, because I was talking with Dan, hi Dan, I was talking with Dan about this, and he said, "Can we substantiate that somehow?" So anyway, I've put my brother onto it to see if he can find out if there was in fact a murder in that building. I just know that it was quite an interesting experience, but I've also had a really good ghost experience as well. So anyway, that's me. That's done. I'm done. So let's those storytellers. Let's unmute, and I'll bring us all together. We'll share the spotlight for a moment. So unmute yourselves. Let's talk. Let's chat.
I wanted to tell you one other experience I had, which was the very weirdest one. And then I wanted to ask Dan if he wanted to tell his grandfather's second story. And then that he really has a little episode you'd like to add. But I was hired to tell stories in Lake George, which is very far from New York City. And I completely miscalculated the time. And I arrived 2 hours after the show would have ended. My hosts were very, very nice to me about it, and then suggested that I spend the night in their house. They'd always wanted to show it to me in Woodstock.
Oh.
I don't know if you ever have this experience, but someone makes an invitation to you and you have a feeling that you shouldn't go. But I felt so guilty because I had completely missed the show that I said, "Oh, sure." And so I was behind them. It was a long ride. It was getting very dark. And by the time we got into their driveway, I could make out the house, which was sort of like a triangle, sort of a triangle with a large window reflected in the moonlight. And parked, and they said, "We have so many antiques. We thought you're a storyteller. You'd like to see them." So we opened up, went into the front room. They turned the light on, and there were shelves along one wall, sort of narrow shelves, one after the other, with a collection of bald dolls' heads. And some of them had, very bulging eyes or very sweet eyes. Some had one. It was really awful, actually. And I felt a little ill, actually, and so thank you very much. And they said, "Oh, we'll show you everything else in the morning." I said, "Fine." Took me to my bedroom, which was actually sort of a normal bedroom, so I felt relieved. And with a very large window in the bedroom and I got under the covers when just as I was about to fall asleep, I heard like laughter, children's laughter and running and splashing, sound of splashing. And I looked out the window and I didn't see anything at all. It was pitch black. And so I just thought, what's that? And got back into bed when all of a sudden, standing there at the window was a man. And he had on a hat that was kind of off to one side. And he looked really unhappy and was just looking at me in the window. And I just pulled the covers up over my head. And then I heard him wail. It was just a lament, like a horrendous lament. And then again, splash. So needless to say, I did not sleep. But I did have it in mind that I was going to get out of there as quickly as I could. But when I packed whatever I had, got dressed, went outside, there was a little picnic table. And they were inviting me for breakfast and I couldn't say no. And I sat down, they were pouring coffee and they said that I looked exhausted. And I said, I really was exhausted. I had not slept. And I kind of glanced over and saw an old stone well with a piece of wood covering it. And I felt completely like chilled. And then I told them of what I'd heard about the children, the sound of children laughing. And as if, this was just not horrendous whatsoever, the woman said, oh, yes, this used to be a one-room schoolhouse and nobody lived here for 90 years. We fell in love with it. But it said that all those children once actually playing and daring each other drowned in that well. So I thought to myself, I have got to get out of here, and felt a little ill. And so I said, well, I saw a man. I said, well, what did he look like? And I described him. And then my host again said, oh, there was a teacher who lived in the one-room schoolhouse. And he was so desperate and so unhappy at the death of these children that he would roam around the house screaming. He went completely mad. And then one day he jumped into the well and killed himself. Would you like some coffee? So I was just completely, utterly. So I just said, oh my God, I forgot that I have an appointment. I have to leave. And I just drove home. I didn't say goodbye or anything. And when I got to my house, the phone was ringing. And they called to find out if I was okay. And were just lamenting that they hadn't shown me all the other antiques and said I could certainly come to visit again whenever I wanted. But I have never called them again.
Sounds like a Black Mirror story or something that I can't think of his name. The guy that directed The Color of Water and the Pan's Labyrinth. Sounds like one of his stories.
Yeah.
Would you like some coffee?
Well, we could go on gallery view, and if anyone would like to, and I haven't forgotten your second grandfather's story, but and anyone in our illustrious audience have an experience you would like to share with us? I think if you put up the little hand. Yeah, Robin. Well, let's see. Well, Linda Ford. Okay, let's hear from Linda. Then we can hear from Robin. again.
Laura, you know, I used to give tours at Sleepy Hollow Cemetery in New York, and they were art and history and robber barons. And I could walk around the 90 acres of the cemetery in the middle of the night in complete darkness by myself and not be afraid. So when I moved to Florida, I was invited to coordinate tours at Monticello, which is billed as the South's most haunted small town. And I thought, sure, I can do that. And it turned out that there was something to them earning that name. I was giving a tour of the old jail, and the men's jail was in the main building, and the jailer and his family lived on the first floor, and all of the cells were upstairs. And the women's jail was in a two-story tower, almost Rapunzel-esque, just adjacent. And so we were going up the stairs to look in one of the cells of the women's jail, and we glanced across at the apartment where the jailer and his wife and his children would live. And we saw, as if you were watching the reflection of a television show in a window, a woman with her hair up in a bun and clearly an early 1900s outfit. And she was looking out the window and gesturing. And I resigned shortly after that.
Oh, Linda, thank you. Rain. Can you?
Unmute yourself.
Yeah.
Please. Thank you.
Can I go after the next person?
Sure, yeah. Robin, do you want to tell us another story? Did you have your hand up, or did someone else?
Well, I did, but Rain, why don't you go and see maybe that'll spark someone else's.
Well, I usually listen to what came before me so that it could be in the same vein of energy.
Okay, well, Rain,
And
there are two.
I had to step away to
Okay.
take care of my mom. But what were you saying, Laura?
Would you rather wait a little bit, or do you want to go ahead?
Oh, I'll go ahead.
Okay. Can we see you, or would you rather remain?
Let me see if you can see me. Let me see how I look. I look okay. I look okay. Oh, yes. I was inspired by, let me find her. I'm looking for the person. She told the stories about Hawaii,
Oh, Nancy. Yeah. Nancy. Yeah.
Nancy.
Nancy. Is she still here?
Yeah.
Okay, I don't see her. Well, I was inspired by her story, and I feel like it was something I actually needed to hear. And I had a hard time getting on, but I came on when she began. And I needed to hear that story because it brought forth a full circle for me. In 2010, I traveled to Rwanda to do my doctoral research. And I interviewed survivors, rescuers, and killers who experienced genocide. And most of the interviews took place in sacred sites where massacres had occurred. And there was the story started flooding. So I'm like, okay, wait, okay. Ooh, I can tell one story, which the one story encompasses all of the stories. When I went to one sacred site, which was a church. You know, they do this to me. I talk about the church, and then they want to talk about the school. So the first site I went to that inspired all of my journey was a church. And I was with a group of international leaders from around the world. We went to this church, and many people had been killed there. And many people would go to churches and schools because they were considered to be safe sites. And we toured the inside of the church. Oh. Many people were massacred. And the site actually had the clothing of the people as part of the memorial, packed, stacked in aisles. And towards the end of the journey, we were led to the back of the church where we could go down into sort of like a catacombs where there were shelves and shelves of skulls and bones. And they asked the group who would like to go down. And everyone said no. And I was like, thank you, but I think I'll pass as well. And there was a voice that said, go back. I was like, no, I don't want to. Go back. Come. Oh, God. So I turned around and I stood at the top of the steps. And there was a lady there sweeping, looking at me. And I looked at her, and she sort of like encouraged me, you need to go. And many of the people who work at these sites, it's their families who are there. And I was like, oh my goodness, respect, okay? So I slowly walked down into this dark, very narrow steps. And when I got to the bottom, I looked to my left, I looked to my right, and there were long aisles on each side. And I thought, I think I've seen it. No. Go. No. And so I turned to the left and I walked, and it was so narrow that, my arms were being scratched by the sides of the shelves, and it was just skulls and bones. And I heard these voices saying, look at me here. I was killed too. Look at me. And I'm just looking like, yeah, okay. And then I turned around and they like, go to the other end. And I went to the other end. Look at me. I was killed too. Look at me. Look what happened to me. Look. And I'm just looking. And I go back up the steps slowly. And I knew that had I not done that, those voices would have followed me for the rest of my life. Similar situation at the school, a beautiful technical school where people gathered and were massacred. And when I saw that the remains were of children, I collapsed. And the two elderly women, one grabbed me on one side and they literally like lifted me. And I was so angry. And I went and sat under a tree. And those women, they were standing nearby with toilet paper to wipe my tears. And they were like, we're going to watch this one. They were watching over me, making sure I was okay. And I sat under the tree angry. And the voice said, it is so easy to acknowledge the big genocides and the big massacres. But you must understand that it's not the big massacres, it's the little genocides that people do every day that look, the words that we say, excluding someone because of, it's the little genocides, the little words that kill, the little looks that kill, that create the big genocides. So this is what I carry with me, these stories. And sometimes I'm compelled to tell them tonight, even when I really don't want to, but I have to.
Thank you so much, dearest Rain. Thank you. I think we all need to hear that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nancy, do you want to say anything about that? Oh, you're muted. You have to.
Yeah. Yeah, we exchanged a little bit in the chat, and we both have the same message that, you know, it's love and compassion that has to be the healing force. And Rain had said that that's what she was told too, that she must tell their stories, and that through love and compassion, things can heal. So it's true. It's you know, and we both talked about, I feel sometimes foolish telling, you know, these stories because it seems like so simple. What? Love? Don't we have to do like, you know, I mean, go through the bureaucracy and get the governments involved and get them to talk to each other? I mean, so it seems like so simple, but it's the truth. Yeah, it's the truth. Yeah. Love and compassion.
Yeah, right.
Thank you, Carol. Lena, Ruth.
Yeah, we've got a whole bunch of people here. I'm going to go in order, though, because Alina Beth was up there first, so I'm going to throw her up here. You ready?
I am. I'm not sure if Carol was before me though. I
Oh, I
think
don't
when
know.
I
It just logs
raised
it.
my hand, I thought I saw her.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I was just taking the
Maybe.
first one from the left. I'm going down the. Go for it.
Okay.
Sorry, Carol.
Okay. I don't think that people in general over my life would have described me at any point as morbid. However, one of the first formative memories that I have really is parents leave their kids in front of the TV and a lot, and you know you're not supposed to have them watching Nightmare on Elm Street, but you wouldn't think that a Shirley Temple movie would be anything bad. But one of the early memories was seeing, I think it was Bright Eyes, where Shirley Temple's mother figure, I think mother, is so happy out in the street of New York where I lived, carrying a birthday cake home to Shirley Temple for her happy, happy day, when a car runs into her and what you see on the screen is her body next to a box crashed open with the broken birthday cake in it.
Oh,
They say that when a child is left at home alone, they might be worrying about themselves. Oh, I'm scared to be alone. I was not scared to be left alone. I was scared that my mother was going out in the street. There wasn't a day that I didn't worry about my mother. When I was 9, the worst final thing happened, but it wasn't my mother. It was my father. He had been, in a way, kind of a phantom in my life, and even in death he almost was. I feel like I can still remember seeing his face at night in the dark, close to the ceiling above the 7-day candle that was burning. But it was just a sense of loss with him over my life, all the things that I realized I would never get to talk to him about. I did get to keep my mother for such a long time. When she was 60 when she was diagnosed with cancer. And she was such a powerful woman, and she fought it off for 20 years. And in her last year, when she would have the strongest chemo and be lying in bed, barely able to lift a finger, the next day, she would go and have a blood transfusion and literally be out dancing at night with her boyfriend. This wasn't in New York anymore. This was in Las Vegas. She had moved to Las Vegas with her then husband, who wanted a nice, peaceful, quiet place to be, a house looking out over a golf course. But after he passed, she was like, I can't be with these old people. And she got an apartment in a brand new building on the Las Vegas Strip. When the end did come, we knew that it was
Natural
coming.
storytellers. Jeez.
And I said to my mom, you know, you're going to have to haunt me. She looked at me, she went, oh, yes! So I fully was expecting it. I knew some things that people look for because I have a friend, he and his fiance had been hit by a car and they both died, and he came back and he told me, Laura makes the lights go on and off. Look for that when the time comes. When the time did come, in that brand new building with perfect electricity, what had never happened before in all the many times I visited her, the lights going on and off and on and off until I would say, hello, Mommy, thank you. And I felt as if I heard her going, look at me, as if she was flying free. A few weeks later, in that building, we had her memorial. I was in charge of everything, as of course I would be, storytelling about her life. And she always had lots of candles burning. We just had a couple. And in the middle of the memorial, there was bang, bang, banging on the door, interrupting the memorial. What is it? What is it? And the people from the building, where's the fire? Where's the fire? There's no fire. But the fire alarm went off. Oh, yeah, that would be my mom. She made the doorbell go off. And my husband didn't believe that it was her. He thought, oh, there must be young kids coming by, ringing the doorbell and running away, until finally he was standing at the door while it was open talking to someone, and the doorbell went off. He's like, okay, Alma, I believe you. She made a music box start to play when my brother happened to visit, and the music box hadn't been wound in at least a decade.
Elena, this is a fabulous story, but you have
But
about
time to stop.
30 seconds left.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
So much.
Okay. I'm so grateful to my powerful mom for haunting me. She's not doing that quite as much as she did. I think maybe she deserves a little bit of a rest while she flies about.
Thank you. A real haunting. Thank you so much. Yeah.
3 first names, Kay, Beth.
Mhm. I think we could keep them very short so that we could hear from a few more people, which would be really lovely. But thank you, Carol, and then Ruth. Sound good, Simon?
Sounds good to me. There you go, Karen.
Well, in the 1980s and 90s, I used to go to an ashram in the Catskills. And my parents just could not understand what the attraction was. My father was a scientist and very like logical and scientific minded, not very spiritual minded. So my parents did not really understand this. And there was this one time when I was there for a special meeting, and I woke up very early to do the morning meditation, which I usually couldn't get myself to do because it was so early. So I went to the meditation hall and sat for meditation against the wall with the guru's chair facing out towards the meditation hall. And as I meditated, my parents came into the hall and walked up to me and started talking very loud and excited, very loud. And I looked up at them and I was very, very surprised to see them. And they both looked radiantly happy, like full of light, wreathed with golden light. And they just kept talking and saying hello and talking. And I said, shh, people are meditating. Let's go out into the hall. So I took them and we walked down the middle aisle, and I took them out of the meditation hall and into sort of the foyer hall so that we weren't going to bother people. And I said, why are you here? What are you doing? You didn't tell me you were going to come. And they said, oh, we just wanted to come and see you. We just wanted to say hello. We just wanted to greet you. And they looked radiantly happy, happier than I had ever seen them in my life. And we were having this wonderful conversation when all of a sudden the gong for the end of meditation went off. And I opened my eyes and I was back in the hall, sitting against the wall. And I was a bit disoriented, and I realized, oh, this was a meditation experience. It was, my parents didn't actually come. This was a meditation experience. So I went to breakfast and told my colleagues that I had come with, that I had driven down from Toronto with, about what happened. And they go, oh, what a wonderful experience and that. Then when the weekend was over and we were driving back, I was in the passenger seat of the car next to my friend Michael, who was driving the car. And Michael was very well versed in a lot of esoteric knowledge. So I turned to him and I said, it had occurred to me, something had occurred to me. And I said, Michael, you know, when I was meditating in the hall, it was really, really early in the morning. And back in Toronto, my parents would have been asleep. It was as if their subtle bodies actually came and visited me. It was as if that happened. And he turned to me and he said, not as if, Carol. That's exactly what happened. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks, Karen.
Ruth, and then maybe
Thank you.
Robin can take us home.
So I'm not a storyteller, and this is not really going to be a story, but it's going to be a very brief mystery that I will share with you. And in order to do that, I have to introduce you to something. Let's see. This is my head. And this is my great aunt, Frida Krapinski's hat. And this head
has human hair. I used to get my hair cut at a particular salon where they practiced on these heads with human hair. And I really had a great relationship with my hairdresser. And we used to talk about how there was a whole room in the hair salon that none of the customers ever went into, but that's where all the heads were. And we began to speak with one another and tell stories about the heads and how when people left the hair salon for the day or the evening, that's when the heads would come alive and they would have all kinds of conversations, and they all had human hair. And so, you know, they would share the stories of the people whose hair they had on their heads. And one Halloween, I was in a writing group, and we all decided we were going to write Halloween stories. And I told my hairdresser, and she said, hold on a second. She went away and she came back with this head. And she said, you can have this head and write about her for Halloween. And so this head came to live with me. And I hadn't thought about this until now. This is the mystery. My hairdresser moved, and there wasn't anybody else whose hair cutting I liked as well. And so I went away. I mean, I went to a different salon to get my haircuts. And then the hair salon went out of business. And the mystery is I haven't wondered until just now, as I was hearing all these stories, where did the heads go? The heads with their human hair. And do they still have the company of one another? Do they still come awake and alive when all the hairdressers and their customers go home?
Maybe they went to that house in Woodstock. Ruth, fantastic. Thank you. Angela.
Hello. I'm in my car. I took my neighbor somewhere, but I had a little story I wanted to offer, if I may.
Yeah, please.
Okay. I'm not driving. I'm parked. Okay. So this has to do with after my mama passed away, and 6 years later, I was working with a woman here in the high desert who this has to stay in this. I was working with her on 12 steps. She was my sponsor, and she was a bronze bell maker. And she invited me to her home when she was going to be doing a ritual for letting go people in our lives who had passed away. And so there was like 10 of us, and she invited us to lay down on our backs in a circle, our feet in the center. And so there's like 10 of us. We made this beautiful circle of women laying down on our backs. And she talked us through a journey going underground. And she had suggested that I think about letting my mother go, that perhaps if I just really clearly offered that to the spirit of my mother, that that might be useful. So it was not nighttime, it was late afternoon, and I did this lovely meditation where there's just two images. Going down, way down in the earth, I came upon a little cave, and there were miniature people, and a young girl. And these images look like black paper cutouts you might see in illustrations of old books. So it was just black ink, and a young girl sitting on a stone with an open book. So that was an image. And then there were some other things, and we had a animal friend we could invite to go down with us. And then I did very clearly said, okay, Mama, I'm going to let you go. And you can go, you go anywhere you want, and I'll always remember you. And suddenly the whole vista changed, and it was as though someone was flying above the earth like a bird, not so far up, close to land, above trees. And that it just was so magnificent, this view of maybe 15, 20 feet up in the air, but going across all these landscapes, marsh, grass, forest, gardens, sand, water. And I just felt like I was seeing what she got to see as she let go. It was so beautiful. That is all.
What a remarkably beautiful story.
Yeah, it was just beautiful.
Thank you. Well, we have a few minutes, and Robin, did you want to add a little teeny spice here?
Got a little short story. I just wanted to talk to what Simon said, something Simon said, which was he talked about that cold wind that comes when a spirit passes you by. Some of you may know that my house is haunted, and it's not a malignant spirit. It's a very friendly one. It welcomed us into our house. That's a lot why we bought it. It was the house was a mess, and we felt this really like it was a spirit putting its arms around us. And yada, yada, yada. We move in. My husband and his son, who's living with us, go to play basketball somewhere, and I'm all alone with the cats, curling up under the covers. It's cold, but it's cold out. It's November, December. And all of a sudden, my cats just went on alert. And I felt this incredible cold wind come into my bedroom. And over on, I was lying in the bed. Over on my right side, I could smell cigar smoke. And when I looked there, I just saw the plume of cigar smoke. And once I acknowledged it, that it was there, I think I just closed my eyes and said out loud, I'm really scared. Please go, or something like that, or thank you for visiting, letting me know you're there. And with that, the heat went on, or at least that's what I thought it was. And it got warm again in the room, and the cats relaxed and I relaxed. We've had different experiences with that, whatever that spirit. My husband experiences him as a mass of body odor. He can go different places and he smells. It's like somebody is standing there that stinks. And he even sat down in it. But I do know that we have that spirit's in there. I have a friend who's a Santeria priestess, and she's been passed on in her family. And she described him, what he looked like, and it was exactly like I imagined, including the cheap cigar that he smoked. That's it.
Thank you, Robin. Well, Lynn's gonna tell us something, and then we're going to close with a song from our beloved Joy Smith.
Dan.
Close the doors to the other world. So Lynn, yes.
Yes, very quickly. I know that part of what we're sharing this evening is a love that goes beyond the veil that separates us in any way. Years ago in Gallipolis, Ohio, which is just across the Ohio River from West Virginia, there were some people who wanted to have a storytelling program at the Ariel Theater there. And so they invited some Ohio tellers. We were volunteering our services, and we went to the theater, and people were a little bit hesitant at first. They weren't sure that they wanted to tell us something. And finally, and the assistant to the mayor said, well, I guess it'll be okay, but we haven't really used the building too much. And people, they think that it's haunted. And he didn't go into any explanations that were big. He just kind of looked very nervously at the storytellers. And I said, well, we're storytellers, and I don't think we'll have a problem. And I turned to the door that would lead into the hall that led into the theater. And I said, excuse me, whoever you are, I just want to let you know that we're here to tell stories. Is it all right for the storytellers to come in? And I said it just kind of nonchalantly, and the door clicked, and the double door opened on its own. And we went into the hall and into the theater. And none of the things that they expected to happen happened. Nothing dropped on the stage. There were no noises in the background. There were no extra voices or anything that they told us about afterward. But when we finished the program and walked out, the door actually closed on its own and clicked shut. So I know that storytellers are welcome beyond the veil and everywhere.
Oh, that's neat. That's wonderful.
Thank you, Lynn. Well, before we close for the evening, and I'm sure we could probably go on and on through the night. It's so wonderful to have everyone's stories and voices like this. I really want to thank the storytellers for this wonderful offering at this special table. I want to thank Simon for really helping me advertise. I only talked to him about 6 times today. And so thank you. And thank all of you for coming and making this such a love-filled and wonderful Halloween experience for us all. I think everybody's heart has been opened, and really a sense of regard for the reality of the invisible world that is so with us. So thank you. Joy, we would love to have a song so we could just close the door and let them rest well.
Okay. I'll have to find it. Okay, that was creepy. Yes, I would love to sing a song. I don't know if it'll close the door, but it'll open and then close. Okay. You know this poem. I just know a musicalized version of it that I learned maybe a couple of years ago. Little orphan Annie's come to our place to stay, and wash the cups and saucers and brush the crumbs away, and shoo the chickens off the porch and dust the hearth and sweep, and make the fire and bake the bread and earn her board and keep. and all us other children. When the supper things is done, we sit around the kitchen fire and has the mostest fun. A listening to the ghost tales that Annie tells about. But the goblins will get you if you don't watch out. Now, once there was a little boy who wouldn't say his prayers, and when he went to bed at night away upstairs, his mama heard him holler, his daddy heard him bawl, but when they turned the covers back, he wasn't there at all. And they seeked him in the rafters, in the cubby hole and press, and they seeked him in the chimney flue and everywheres, I guess. But all they ever found was just his pants and roundabout. And the goblins will get you if you don't watch out. And once there was a little girl who always laugh and grin and making fun of everyone and all her blood and kin. And once when there was company and old folks was there, she mocked them and she shocked them and she said she didn't care. And just as she kicked up her heels to turn and run and hide, there were two gray shadows standing by her side. And they snatched her through the ceiling, for she knows what she's about. And the goblins will get you if you don't watch out. And little orphan Annie says that when the flame is blue and the lamp wick flutters and the wind goes woo, and you hear the crickets quit and the moon is gray and the lightning bugs in the dew is all squinched away, you better mind your parents and your teachers fond and dear, and cherish them that loves you, and dry the orphan's tear, and help the poor and needy ones that clusters all about. Or the goblins will get you if you don't watch out.
That was so cool, Joy.
That was great.
Weird. Wonderful.
Yes. Well, thank you.
And thank you to everyone. This was really an experiment, and I'd like to do this from time to time, have these wonderful pop-up evenings where we all share our stories, and really, that I'm so moved by all of you, by your generosity, and also by this wonderful gathering. So feast and thank you, and have the wonderful, wonderful dream-filled night.
Thank you, Laura, and thank you all. This has been a great way to spend Halloween.
Ah, thank you so much. Now go on out there in the dark and see what you can see.
Thank you, dear.
Thank you, Eleanor. I see you, Eleanor.
And Simon.
Thank
Roy,
you, everyone.
Ruth, Charles,
There's
Takumi, Jeff, Philomena, Eleanor, Eileen,
And Jeff Gear. Hi, Jeff.
That was fun.
This is birthday. Happy birthday,
Vancouver.
Jeff Gear's birthday.
Yes, happy
Jeff.
birthday,
Hey, Jeff.
Jeffy.
How you doing? Didn't see you there.
Eileen Chua.
Hi,
Birthday, Jeff.
Yeah.
Thank goodness it's sunny in Singapore.
Singapore.
Oh,
Yes.
nice. It's raining here and cold and windy.
In Hawaii, the sun is still up, and we're just setting up to hand out stuff to kids.
Oh, wow.
I've got to get on my costume.
What are you gonna be?
What are you dressing up as?
I'm going to be a rich Chinese person.
I'm going to get dressed up as Jeff Gear.
Yeah, that's
I do that all
scary
the time. That's no costume.
But it's scary. It's still spooky.
I was biting my tongue. I got so many of these kind of stories, but it was beautiful to hear everyone else's. I really enjoyed it. Thanks for the birthday present, you guys.
Yeah.
Birthday to you.
Yes, happy birthday.
We're all going to haunt you.
We'll send them your way to wish you a happy birthday.
I don't know the name of that shark. I think that shark from whatever, I don't know where the hail was, but I think that's a
Yeah.
local shark.
We were at South Point.
Kamo o ali'i.
Kamoali'i is
I think
the
we were
shark
in
god.
we were in South Point and the Big Island.
Oh,
Ooh, you better
yeah,
watch
that's a very remote place. In fact, Lynn Ford once went there to tell